Our first stop in Chiapas was the town of Chiapa de Corzo. It's about 30 minutes from Tuxtla, or the airport in Tuxtla anyway. It's about the same distance to go to either, so we decided to go to Chiapa de Corzo because it's one of Mexico's Pueblo Mágicos, which are towns that have been designated as magical. It's a much smaller town than Tuxtla. It's about 20,000 people or something like that, but no big tourist infrastructure, and definitely more relaxing than a big city like Tuxtla would be. And after being on the plane overnight, we needed a break, and this actually was perfect. It's a very Mexican town in that it does exist partly as a tourist town. It's the launching point for the Sumidero Canyon, which is also a reason we picked it, but more on that later. But it's got a very Mexican feel. It's got all the street food, and just a pace of life that's really good. We enjoyed it immensely. Should probably point out that we visited Chiapa de Corzo, and the whole duration of our Chiapas trip was over the period around Valentine's Day, so you'll see a lot of Valentine's Day stuff in every place we visit. The colonial structures of Chiapa de Corzo date back to the early 16th century, and in fact it's the oldest established colonial town in Chiapas. But before that, it was a pretty important Mesoamerican site from between 700 to 500 BC. It was a zoque, which is a sort of a precursor to the Mayan in the region. Some Olmec connections there. Not exactly sure, but and there's a fairly extensive site just outside of town that we visited. The site itself, it's pretty small, but it's worth a stop. It's free to get into. As I mentioned earlier, one of the other reasons we chose Chiapa de Corzo as sort of our early base for the Chiapas trip was because of its proximity to the Sumidero Canyon. That's in fact like where you take the boat from for most of the boat trips. So we were able to walk down to the docks and get on a boat. It does cost 400 pesos a person, but it's a cool trip. It takes about 2.5 hours. And you go up the river and you see some crocodiles, some monkeys, and some cool rock formations amongst the big cliffs that tower up. And eventually you end up in a sort of a hydro reservoir. The water goes from Chiapas down to Villahermosa in Tabasco. But yeah. This is one of the most famous rock formations on the trip. It's known as the Christmas tree. It's created by a waterfall above it dripping down, and the minerals calcifying, and they get this sort of green smudge on it. But one of the unfortunate things about being in the front of the boat was it was difficult to film. I mean, you didn't have to worry about passengers in front of you or anything, but actually, sticking the camera out and making sure it was level was kind of tricky at times. But it was an enjoyable trip in the baking sun. The day after we did the Sumidero Canyon boat trip, we woke up, had a nice leisurely breakfast, and headed back to the airport to pick up a rental car. And then we drove up to San Cristobal de las Casas. It's about a 2-hour drive. We were supposed to stop at a waterfall along the way, but I sort of got on the quota road by accident, so we showed up in San Cristobal a little early. We couldn't check into our Airbnb quite yet, so we checked out some of the pedestrian walking streets and had a drink in a cafe. It's quite nice. San Cristobal's a beautiful old colonial town. It's quite high elevation, like it's at 2,200 meters, which I like. It's cooler at night, which is nice, and even in the day it can get warm, but it's not oppressively hot, and there's zero humidity. Makes it very comfortable. It's not the biggest tourist destination, but it's definitely a focus point for Chiapas. Like, it was our focus point. We spent 5 of the 10 nights on this trip in San Cristobal. And it's frequented by European travelers. And it's just a great place to eat and go see the sights. Valentine's Day is the thing. At the heart of town is this big yellow cathedral. It's, in the main square, and really sort of the town centers around that. There aren't many tall buildings. It's just a lot of low colonial, 2-story buildings, and it's laid out in a grid. Traffic is it's not bad to drive around, but parking is extremely difficult to find, especially during the day. We usually have to park a couple blocks from our Airbnb, but it's a very walkable city, and lovely. Because we spent 5 nights in San Cris, we were able to dedicate some time to the city itself, it's always good to do that. And one of the things we did was this morning hike up to see the Mirador at the Templo of San Cristobalito. It's a prominent hill outside of town, and it's quite steep going up. Some people choose to run up for their morning exercise, but given the high elevation, we just sort of huffed our way up slowly. Beautiful up the top, very wooded. I thought maybe I could fly my drone from there, but no. But well worth the hike. Got a couple geocaches on the way down, so that was cool. We also dedicated a whole afternoon to visiting the markets in town. This first one here is the Mercado de Santo Domingo. It's centered around an old church. It's mainly like an artesian market, clothing, textiles, little Zapatista dolls, that sort of thing. But it's really cool. It's set up, in the square of the church under these big trees. It's tarped off, but it's kind of cool. It's an indoor outdoor feeling. Lots of Mayan women walking around in their traditional dress. After visiting the sort of handicraft market, we went over to the main municipal market of San Cristobal. I always love going to the big markets in any, Latin American town. They're great, and San Cristobal's market does not disappoint. Massive, and just a hub of activity. They sell everything in here from fresh fruits and vegetables, clothing, household supplies, and a lot of meat. Just a ton of meat, chickens everywhere. But yeah, it's fascinating. Mangoes were in season, which is great. After visiting the markets, we actually went to a chocolate museum. It was interesting. You know, learned the history of cacao and the differences between African and Central American cacao and how that plays out. Got to taste some cool fermented chocolate treats. And then, yeah, we just wandered around town, found a good place to eat, had a nice dinner, and then went home to our Airbnb. Had a few cervezas and cocktails. It was a good day.
Eso es. Muy buenas tardes, San Cristóbal de las Casas. Bienvenidos al pueblo más mágico de todo el estado de Chiapas.
Our first major excursion out of San Cristobal was down to a place called Puente. It's a Mayan ruin site. It's about 100 kilometers southeast of San Cristobal and down a bit in elevation, but it does take about 2.5 hours to drive there just because of the condition of the roads. So many topes or speed bumps, and yeah, you just can't go fast. Google times are correct, and they're long.
Central. Nice church.
Like I said, this is a pretty big town. The site itself is very impressive, and it's also very extensive. You show up there, there's a little parking lot, and you do have to pay 140 peso entrance fee, and then you're just kind of on your own. It's forested, and you can definitely climb up all the pyramids. And one of the things that was really fascinating about this place was the way it just kept going. Like, we kept stumbling upon ball courts and temples over about 3 or 4 different levels of land. This was the most, I guess, classically impressive of all the temples on the site. You know, it's a Mayan pyramid. It's pretty cool. I did climb it. It was easy to get up and harder to get down Got some good views from the top. Best thing about this place was there was no one there. We had it to ourselves. There was a little dog that we interacted with, and when we were leaving, there was a Mayan family that showed up that was, taking their relatives to see the temples. But other than that, wide open, no tourists. It was beautiful. At some point, I completely lost Kira after the main temple there, and we sort of went our separate ways. I eventually found her. It's all good. And she showed me some things that she found that I missed. One of the things I missed was this cross that they had built on the side of this one pyramid, and they do modern ceremonies, like, the Mayas still exist, so they come up here and it's sort of a hybrid Catholic Mayan ritual they perform annually. After our visit to Tenampuente, we headed over to El Chiffon, which is a very impressive waterfall. Chiapas is riddled with these rivers that are fed by these underground aquifers, and the limestone karst topography there just creates these vibrant aquamarine colors. And Chiapas has numerous waterfalls that you can go visit. This is one of the tallest ones for sure, and as a result of that, it's developed. It's got concrete paths on both sides. We're actually on the side that's more visited. It's got some restaurants and stuff. There were a couple tour buses of Mexican tourists while we were there. Unfortunately, it's also 746 stairs to the top of where the waterfall is. You're actually at the base. You could go up to the top on the other side, it looks like, and there were people up there, but in the heat and humidity, I wouldn't recommend that. This side was enough. We grunted and sweated our way up there, and were rewarded with some wonderful views of brilliant aquamarine water. Truly beautiful.